All right, well, we're rolling. We're live, and appreciate you being here, John Capek.
Hey, thank you for inviting me.
I have to tell you, being on Country Drive, I think the quote is, music is the universal language of the world.
I think it is. I just read an article about new research being done using music as a kind of a therapy for people in trouble, and seems to be extremely
There it goes.
extremely powerful.
Well, no, it's no worries. I say that because I think for the podcast, you are, as far as a citizen of the world, the person who has the most world travel of anyone else that's ever been on the podcast.
Well, hey, if that's a credit, I accept it.
Yeah. I mean, from Bohemia, the Czech Republic.
Yep, I regard myself as a true Bohemian, because Bohemia is the state where the capital city of Prague. Prague is, and I was born there. And family traveled to Australia, where I grew up and went to school and played in a bunch of blues bands and all of that. Got a chemical engineering degree while I was there. I don't know why. And then traveled to Canada and was there for a while. Then California, Los Angeles, there for a while. Then back to Toronto for some time. And then as the music business went through its changes, I thought Nashville was going to be Custer's last stand for the music industry, which it kind of is.
Yes, sir.
And so I've been here for about 12 years. I love it. I think it's a great place to be.
Yeah, you're the kind of person that helps the world understand that Nashville is not just a country music town.
No, not at all.
Very much a musical town.
There are so many musicians here who've come from Los Angeles, New York, Australia, a lot of the places that I'm familiar with. So when I arrived here in Nashville, I instantly plugged into a scene of musicians who I knew from other places who'd also made the same decision to come here.
And I also have to congratulate you on now you are a Hall of Famer.
In the Canadian, wow, I thought I turned that thing off. I must be in demand.
It's okay if you want to put it on silent.
I did. I don't know why it's doing that.
Well, that might be the wife then.
Yeah. So, it's the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame that I was inducted into last November. And there's a particular thing about that particular organization. It's pretty small. There are maybe 60 or 70 inductees altogether. And people don't realize who some of these people are in terms of their connection with Canada. So you got Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, Leonard Cohen. I'm trying to think of who else. There's a whole bunch of them at that kind of level of songwriting. And I've always been attracted to, there's a certain sort of Canadian lyric sense. I've always thought of it as being, because it's so cold in Canada, people have nothing else to do but to sit in their room in the winter and write poetry. So
it's like the grunge movement of Seattle.
Something like that. So there's a particular Canadian lyric sense that has always been something that I've gravitated to. And even when I was living in Los Angeles, I was commuting backwards and forwards to Toronto to write.
So I'm kind of jumping ahead here because we're going to talk about some of your amazing songwriting and work as a producer and composer. But at this point in your life, what did that mean to you going into the Hall of Fame?
You know, it was just to be acknowledged was a wonderful thing. I think it was that, and they did a particular thing with my induction with my songwriting partner Mark Jordan, where the format was an interview, not dissimilar to this, but I did it at a keyboard, so I could sort of illustrate playing the different kind of stages of songwriting and musical influences that I went through. So I've often tell people I'm much better at expressing myself at a keyboard than I am with language. So as the interviewer was asking me questions, I said, well, I played this like this when I was there, and then my format changed when I was that, and was able to sit at a keyboard and display a lot of what I was trying to express, haltingly with words.
Now I'm looking around the studio to see if we have a keyboard in here, and we do not, because that might make it easier on you. Well, let's talk about some of your work. I was at the beach last week, and I'm walking down the beach, and you might imagine the lyric kept coming to my head, where the ocean meets the sky, I'll be sailing.
Right.
It's a beautiful lyric, so I have to ask you to tell me the story behind Rhythm of My Heart.
There's sort of a funny story. I had been writing songs with my then longtime partner. His name is Mark Jordan. He's a Canadian singer-songwriter who was inducted with me for his body of work and our body of work together. So at a certain point, we'd sort of run out of options in Canada, and we both moved to Los Angeles. And we both had publishing deals. We were both staff writers. He was with Warner Music Publishing, and I was with a company owned by Lawrence Welk that had a pop division. And so it was Welk Music. And they had a writing studio and a fairly rudimentary recording studio where we used to do all our demos. And we were both highly influenced by Celtic music. Mark's father was a professional vocalist, sang with big bands, but one of his main influences was traditional Canadian folk songs that he sang in a sort of a more formal fashion. So Mark grew up with that music. Unusually, you'd never think of it, but there's a huge bluegrass scene in the Czech Republic. It's really popular there. And one of the reasons, I don't know if this is true or not, but there were Celtic tribes that kind of made their way and fought their way across Europe like 1,000 years ago. And I read somewhere that the earliest discovery in archaeological studies of bagpipes was found in Bohemia, of all places. So my theory is that there were a bunch of Celtic tribes raping and marauding and terrorizing their way across Europe, and somewhere in my heritage there's some Celtic kind of thing. I don't know. So I've always gravitated. I like the idea of the drone harmonies. And bagpipes, Celtic. There's a certain kind of almost Middle Eastern aspect to Celtic music. So both Mark and I kind of loved this kind of music, and we had the kind of elements of Rhythm of My Heart, of the song, kind of just put together musically. And Mark said, we need bagpipes on this demo. We've got to find a bagpipe player. So we're in Los Angeles. It's a Sunday. We're in the recording studio at Welk Music, where on Sundays they turn off all the air conditioning. It was about 110 degrees in there. We're incredibly uncomfortable, looking for a bagpipe player on a Sunday in the middle of summer in Los Angeles. And our engineer said, isn't Paul McCartney in town? He's doing a concert. And yeah, he is. And he just had a huge hit with a Scottish song, a Mull of Kintyre or something like that.
I'm not familiar with
it. Yeah, it was a big #1 hit for Paul McCartney, completely a Celtic thing. And we remember that he had a bagpipe player in his band. So we called a couple of hotels where we thought they might be staying. We found him. We found the bagpipe player, called him up in his room. He had a Sunday off. We said, we're a bunch of songwriters, here in Los Angeles. We have a song. We need bagpipes. Would you be interested in coming to the studio and playing some bagpipes on this song? And he said, sure. Do you want me to wear my kilt? I said, no, it's an audio recording. We don't need your kilt. And anyway, he was a lovely guy. He showed up without the kilt, but with his bagpipe. And we had kind of a melody in our heads of what we wanted him to play. So Mark's in the control room. I'm in the studio humming the melody to this Paul McCartney's bagpipe player. Turns out, for a start, I've been to a Led Zeppelin concert.
Mm-hmm.
Bagpipes are louder. Mm-hmm. They're like incredibly loud. And I'm standing next to this guy, humming a tune to him that we wanted him to play. And he had trouble. And we said, what goes on? It looks like you're struggling a little bit with, the Paul McCartney stuff. He says, well, on stage I don't actually play. I mime, like Milli Vanilli.
Right.
It's all recorded. I'm just there for my kilt.
Wow.
And anyway, we finally got the recording. And the way Mark and I wrote, we'd sort of do music first and then lyrics after. So Mark goes away with our track that now has lovely bagpipes on it, and comes up with a rudimentary kind of almost traditional Scottish theme. Mm-hmm. And over time, as we develop the track, I'm primarily the music guy, Mark's primarily the lyric guy, and as we developed the song, the lyric just kind of unfolded itself as the obvious words that went with that particular piece of music.
Yeah. So you guys have a relationship, I guess, similar to Elton and Bernie?
Very much like that, but more so I've gravitated to that a lot more in an opposite way. So if we move forward to more recent times with the Bonnie Raitt song, mm-hmm. I've been writing remotely to lyricists. So somebody gives me a finished lyric, mm-hmm. never get together with them in a room, never meet them sometimes.
Wow.
And I do everything else. So that's been my preferred way of writing now, where I'd rather and that is the Bernie Taupin, Elton John method, where they never actually get together. Bernie gives Elton a lyric, Elton does the rest. So that's my preferred mode of writing these days.
Well, let me ask you, as someone who puts the music to lyrics, I'm sure sometimes you do the lyrics, but putting the music in, what is your take on the muse?
I pretty much regard lyrics in terms of story, and I look at songs as mini movies. Mm-hmm. And so there's the visual element to lyrics, which I prefer if they do have a visual element. And what I'm essentially doing is doing the underscore. So when you go see a movie, there's always music, and the music has the potential to create tension, to create romance, to create pathos, to create all these different moods. So music is a very, very powerful element in movies to trigger the audience response. When there's a chase scene, you have the appropriate music. When there's a sad scene, you have the approach. Sometimes the music is there to preempt what is about to happen, or sometimes to give you a false message of what's about to happen, so that then you're surprised. So all those tools are available to me with music. So I can take the lyric, look at it as a mini movie, and do the underscore by using all those elements, either to create a surprise or to create maybe the opposite of what's happening, or to support what's happening in the lyric. And that's so it's a movie.
Yeah. So you kind of see music in some ways.
Yes, absolutely.
That's interesting. And we should talk about this since you're on the subject.
Mm-hmm.
With film, you've done stuff like Perfect Storm.
That's Rhythm of My Heart was featured in
Perfect Storm.
Yeah.
And then you had one in Cocktail also.
Yeah, yep.
Cocktail is a great soundtrack.
Yeah.
You got a cover of Buddy Holly, a cover of Elvis.
Right.
You got the Beach Boys.
Right.
It's a terrific soundtrack.
It is.
What are some of your top soundtracks of all time?
Well, certainly films that I've scored, but they're Australian films that probably never made it to America. But I love the idea of doing underscore to films, because to me it's the same idea as songwriting. In terms of films that I love and underscore, The Firm would be my favorite of all time, because it's piano based.
Yeah.
Incredible kind of gospel style piano, and if I got another movie, I'd do that.
Yeah. So you were involved in The Firm?
No, it's just something that I really admire and would reflect something that I would do if I was doing another film. Have you done? So you've done scoring though for films. I've done about five feature films. Yeah.
Do they give you just the script and you have to create the visual and the sound for it, or do you look at reels from dailies?
I look at reels.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the films that Mark and I did score, one made for television film. It was called. It was a comedy called The Canadian Conspiracy. And it starred a lot of the Canadian comedians that ended up on Saturday Night Live, and characters that we all know.
Yeah.
It's funny when you're looking at these people, you kind of feel like you know them, because you'd have to look at a scene over and over and over again, and to find the appropriate music that will support the scene.
Yeah. Mike Myers is Canadian, right?
Yep.
So he was probably one of them, perhaps.
It was who's the guys in Schitt's Creek?
Eugene Levy.
Eugene Levy was in it, and the guy Star Wars, Star Trek. I have terrible with names.
I don't know. To be honest with you, I'm getting in trouble, but I wasn't a Star Trek fan.
Right. The captain of the ship.
William Shatner?
William Shatner was in it, and Lorne Greene was in it, and a lot of these people.
What goes into making a great soundtrack?
It's almost like you don't want the music to interfere in the drama, but to support the drama. So it's very much the same in songwriting, where I'm supporting the lyric. The lyric and the singer is sort of predominant, and what you do musically enhances that and makes it better. But using all these tools and techniques, either preempting a scene, supporting a scene, going against the scene, making the scene a surprise, all of these techniques go into that. I've developed, because I have a classical music education, I can draw on just about any genre of music to achieve these things, from what were you saying? From gospel to
EDM,
from gospel to EDM and everything in between.
You mentioned Middle Eastern music earlier. Do you like Middle Eastern music?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, because I have family over there, so I'm into some of their artists. I don't even know what the words they're saying are, but the sounds of like a Feiruz or a Wadia El Safi are just absolutely beautiful.
Absolutely. And Indian music.
Terrific.
It was sitars and the tablas and all of that stuff. And I've done some recording with that influence.
I mean, that's really, for the Beatles, George Harrison started to incorporate that, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's amazing with music when you really start to kind of lose your myopic view of genre, and you kind of take a world view.
Absolutely.
This is why I think you're such an important artist, because you bring so much to the effort of knowing more than just kind of one lane sound.
Sure.
And when people like the Beatles begin to bring in the sitar, you start to get such a bigger view as a fan of what music can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's an example of that. Years and years ago, I went for a holiday with my family. We ended up in Bali, in Indonesia.
Okay.
And there's a traditional sort of chant that Balinese do for certain ceremonies, and there are concentric circles of men there's 100 of them. In these, they sit in concentric circles, and there's a leader who leads a chant, and the chant are rhythmic chants, and as the chants go, they sort of go out from each part of the circle that contributes to the chant, and it's an amazing sound.
Is it like a natural echo? I mean, like an echo?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly what it sounds like. So I was just fascinated with that. I brought it back to Los Angeles, and Mark and I brought back a cassette at the time, and nobody was really doing sampling at the time. So we kind of were some of the innovators of that, the whole concept. So we took a little piece of this chant and used it as a vehicle to create a song around it.
Wow.
And then somebody pitched it to a group by the name of Manhattan Transfer, who were a very, very popular vocal jazz group. I think 14 Grammys over their period of time. Anyway, they recorded the song. And
what's the song called?
This Independence. And there's a recording of Mark singing it as well. He put it on an album.
I got to check it out now.
Yeah.
So you think you might have been the first guy to ever bring sampling to America?
Well, amongst the first, for sure.
I've had 4 different producers on the podcast that all claim to kind of be the first people to do digital.
Right.
So we'll have to get all 4 of them in a room one day to bring that debate out.
Really? No, it was me.
Well, sampling is basically created the rap industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a bad time for rap because it's going to be another stain on the music industry with all this report about P. Diddy coming out.
Yeah.
I hate it when the music industry gets this bad rap because, there's a lot of people that think there's bad actors in the music industry.
I think you could apply the same thing to any creative endeavor. What is the sort of motivating and also the unfortunate aspect of being a creative person is the need to stay open. So my job as a creative person is to reflect what I see around me. And if times are troubled, that reflects itself in the music. If times are happy, it reflects it. In my case, I do the opposite. So if times are really bad, I write some of my prettiest and most aesthetic music.
I love it.
And when everything's good, I'll go to the darker side.
So you're like the antithesis for the current state of the union.
Yeah.
You just go against the grain.
Yeah.
Well, that is the creative mindset against the grain.
Why it is, but yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. Where does that come from? Is that in your DNA? Or is that just you musically?
Yeah, maybe it's my DNA. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I like rebels.
Mm-hmm.
I like people that don't go with the grain. I feel like music, especially in the digital age, is getting a little, it's just this one sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like there's a lot of experimentation going on right now. So I like it when people are willing to kind of go down different lanes.
Right. Well, here I am in Nashville. I don't do country music. I'm not good at it.
Have you given it a shot?
I've sort of tried a little bit, but not getting much response to when I've done that because it's not true to me.
Well, speaking of State of the Union, let's just ask you this. What do you think, as a world-renowned composer, songwriter, musician, about the current state of music in general?
I see it in historical terms. Popular music as a mass medium is only about 150 years old. So around the 1860s, you had the first published popular songs came out on sheet music, and it became something of an industry where sheet music would sell millions of copies of popular songs of the time. And then recording happened, and people would buy 78 RPM records, and you had the great songwriters of Irving Berlin and Jerome Kern and the Gershwins and all of those people. So and then big bands happened. We had Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman and all those sort of people playing these amazing arrangements. And then this guy Chuck Berry came along and Elvis Presley, and they were doing what they were doing, basically stealing black music and making it palatable for white people. And so there's this sort of trajectory, but yet I'd say I'm a bit of a foodie. We go to a lot of restaurants. You walk in, there's ambient music of some kind. 90% of the time, it's old school music. It's Frank Sinatra. It's the Great American Songbook mainly. And so there's something to that music that's lasting.
Mm-hmm.
There's music from the 1860s that we still listen to. There's Bach. Music's 400 years old. We still listen to that. So to me, being part of whatever the current thing is, the current fashion, doesn't seem to be that important. I think it's great to draw from all these different eras and come up with whatever each individual has to express. Just because bro country is kind of a current thing, or whatever's going on, in the thought of there being old school rap, from the 90s, kind of is an odd concept to me.
The 90s, and that's already old school.
Yeah. So I like the idea of drawing on all these different influences, particularly because they're still alive.
Yeah.
They're still happening. So I feel like that's where I live.
Well, there's a feel to the old records.
Mm-hmm.
There's a feel that I don't feel anymore. It's
Right.
very rare that I feel it. Every once in a while I hear an artist and I'm like, man, this is unique. This is fresh.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of discussions about AI on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep getting asked about it. And I've been thinking about this AI issue recently where people that are born now, when they kind of become of age, AI music might be all they ever know. So they might embrace that sound, but it's so weird to me to hear AI, starting to penetrate the music business.
It's an odd thing. There's a struggle I've been having forever. As a songwriter, I'm not a good singer. And so when I write a song, the challenge is how best to display that song. More often than not, my co-writers have great voices. My longtime partner, Mark, has a fabulous singing voice. If I've written with Colin Hay from Men at Work, he has a great singing voice, or a bunch of other people. When I'm writing the melody, as I am mostly these days, I don't sing well. A publisher of mine who loves my songs, he does not like my voice and won't pitch the song to anybody unless I have another singer. So with AI, there's a site I found, LALALAI, I think it's called, or AIAALA, something like that. Anyway, they have a selection of about 150 singers. So I can feed in my voice and it'll come back to me with whatever voice I choose. So I really like Chris Stapleton. So I've done a bunch of recent demos where I fed in my voice and substituted it with
Chris
Stapleton's voice. And it sounds great, but I have no idea what the legality is, or whether in fact anybody would hear that it's sort of artificial. Because it's not Chris's, it's not his phrasing, it's my phrasing. It's just the tonality of his voice. So I'm now kind of playing around with utilizing that or not. I'm not sure.
That's amazing. I bet there's millions of people, if they could choose who they could sound like, it'd be Chris Stapleton.
Right.
That or Otis Redding for me.
It's that. But they have everybody. They have Frank Sinatra. They have Louis Armstrong. They have,
Wow. Is this licensed by the people?
I think they've sort of constructed it out of elements. I don't think it's really Chris Stapleton's voice. But
Right. So it's not licensed by Chris.
No.
It just sounds like him.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've had some fun talking about it. You can get a copy out there with Elvis singing,
Right.
I like big butts and I cannot lie. Well, that's interesting. Now, what about cutting a song or writing a song for Joe Cocker, one of the all-time great voices, in my opinion?
Right. That's one of my favorite cuts. The song is called "Take Me Home." It was a duet with him and it's terrible remembering names, but I'll remember her. And it was the end title theme for a film called Blown Away, where it had a bunch of like great Hollywood actors in it, and it truly is one of my favorite cuts that I've had. They really went to town with the production. I still listen to it today.
Well, it's a beautiful song, and it was with Becca Bramlett.
That's right.
Becca Bramlett. Just want to make sure we gave her credit.
So she was the daughter of Bonnie Bramlett. There was a great R&B act, Delaney and Bramlett and Delaney. They had a bunch of hits in the late 60s, early 70s. And she's a tremendous singer.
Now, Joe is just, that voice, that's a voice that I would be interested for you to type in on AI and see if they can replicate.
Really?
Yeah. I love that scratch.
Absolutely.
It's almost like it's a voice where you can tell his entire life of what he's lived up to that moment is in that sound.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of rare.
Yeah. And a lot of my piano stylings came from his mentor, who is Leon Russell.
Okay.
And so Leon discovered Joe and helped develop him in his early times.
Yeah, wow. And what about, so you have another cut with Chicago,
Yep.
Cher.
Yeah.
Which of these stands out, any of these artists?
What I really like, when I write a song, I have a pretty elaborate studio set up at home. And rather than simply write the song, I try and write the record. Mm-hmm. So the example would be, take the Beatles' Lady Madonna, and the bass line does a thing, and the melody is completely different to the bass line. Yet that bass figure is an element of a key element to the song. Or Whitest Shade of Pale, where the organ part, there was a lawsuit over that. Is that part of the song or not? So I try and come up with the iconic, I hate that word, lines that when the cover band 50 years from now in a Holiday Inn plays that song, they'll be playing the parts that I created.
Correct.
So when I write a song and create the demo master of the song, I'm writing the record. So occasionally, an artist, when they cover the song, will use my demo and just put their voice on it. The most recent one was Bonnie Raitt, not on the current record, but the previous one that she did of mine, and where she tried to record it with the band and it wasn't sounding right, and I get a text from her management saying, Bonnie loves your demo, will you please send the tracks, the Pro Tools sessions. So I sent that off. She put her voice on it, a little enhancement, and that's the record. That's happened with Diana Ross. It's happened, the Toto song, they didn't use the demo, but they copied it pretty much note for note. So when that happens, that's sort of my ideal. It's very unusual that a cover will happen where an artist will record one of my songs where I like the way they arranged it. Usually they mess it up because they haven't copied my demo. The exception to that is the current Bonnie Raitt song, where she took my demo and made it 1,000,000 times better.
Wow.
And so it sort of doesn't get better than that.
Wow. Well, a lot of people take the lyrics and just hand them off, and then a producer. But when you deliver a song, it's already basically a deliverable.
Yeah, pretty much.
Based on the sound. That's fascinating. So you had a lot of success in the 80s, 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
What do you see as what were the key elements of 80s music? Because I was born in 80, so I grew up in the 80s, and I go back and I love it. Very heavily synth, but what made 80s music great in pop and rock?
I see the current era as being sort of a reactive, going against what was happening there. So a huge percentage of current hit songs, no matter what artist you name, are reacting against traditional concepts of harmony. So harmony is where you can create an interest in a chord that elicits an emotion, a reaction from a listener. Like D minor is the saddest key. A D minor seventh elicits a certain expectation. When you add an augmented fifth or a fourth, they have emotional responses that the listener has. And it seems that in the current era, there are only 4 chords that I used. Part of that, I think, comes out of naivety, because people don't need to learn more interesting chordal harmonic changes, and the other part of it is reacting against what was going on in the 80s and 90s. What was going on in the 80s and 90s, we're using these kind of melodic and interesting chord structures that elicited a feeling and an emotion from the listener. It also explains how disposable current music is. There's very little of what's currently created that will be meaningful 50, 100 years from now. Yet a lot of that 80s people are still listening to Fleetwood Mac. In fact, Fleetwood Mac is still on the charts, their albums, which is remarkable. You look at a Billboard chart and there's Fleetwood Mac, 100 years old.
Yeah, and not too long ago, the Eagles' Greatest Hits replaced Michael Jackson as the number one album.
So there was a harmonic aspect to that music and a melodic aspect that created interest, and not only interest, but an emotional response from a listener that doesn't exist in current pop music.
So do you think that sometimes musicians have a desire to rebel against something that's older when there actually isn't a reason to rebel against it?
Well, there are reasons. There are certain peaks that happen. The big band era, I think, reached a peak. But one of the reasons was technological. So the big band era, part of the aspect of big bands was that they were loud.
Right.
You had a bunch of horns, and you could be in a dance hall and party on, and they were loud. So along came the electric guitar through an amp. That's loud. So you don't need 12 saxes and half a dozen trumpets and trombones to create the same intensity that the big band. So simply the invention or the use of an amplified electric guitar just eliminated, you don't need all that other stuff to create the same intensity. So some of it's technological.
Yeah.
Like that.
By the way, you mentioned Whiter Shade of Pale earlier, and I cannot tell you how many people that I've talked to that are producers and composers that tell me that is the perfect song ever, most perfect song ever created.
I don't think it's the most perfect song, but
yeah, or the intro.
It's certainly memorable.
Certainly memorable.
Yeah.
What role does meditation play in your career?
In fact, it's part of my daily life.
Yes, sir.
My mother was a yoga teacher for some time. I have unrelated to music, but you asked a question about
Yes.
yoga. My parents came from Europe to Australia, had no money, had struggled a lot, bought their first house, couldn't afford to pay for it, and there was an exchange program with Asian students coming to Australia to study. So we rented rooms to these guys who came from Thailand, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, and they stayed at our house. And I'm like 7 years old. I walk out in the backyard, and these guys are standing on their head and sitting cross-legged, looking at the sky. And I said, "What are you doing?" "We're meditating." "Oh, okay. Why are you standing on your head?" So I was introduced to yoga at a very, very young age. Read some books on it. My mother was interested in it, and I'd pretty much been doing a daily routine that involves some degree or my version of yoga and meditation.
I find it to be so helpful in my life because there's just so much clutter.
Yep.
That I just know at least once or twice a day I'm going to give myself 15 to 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I do put on ear pods, and I go to some YouTube people that I like May Lan,
Right.
or a friend of mine, the Meditation Sherpa, and just give myself 15 minutes to just dive into a frequency but it makes me better suited to tackle all other problems throughout the day. And it's also changed my reaction time to things.
Right. Sure.
Do you find that?
For me, it's more about opening. We're full of kind of fear and restrictions, and sort of closed in. It opens doors. That's and opens creative doors. So it allows me to not just keep going to the same chords, the same thing over and over again, but to be open to. If you ask me how I'm feeling right now, I could play it much better than I could say it.
Yes, sir. Like I said, we should have had the keyboard for you here. Well, let me ask you this. So you've had so much success as a songwriter, composer, producer. We like to talk to our guests sometimes about, advice to others on the drive that it takes to find your lane and achieve not just, a moment of success, but sustained success over time. So how have you approached the drive to make it in your own career?
I would advise anybody else to get a day job. Particularly, again, it's technology that's kind of interfered in the trajectory, in the path. You got to make a living, and under today's kind of circumstances with the digital technology and streaming, a songwriter cannot make a living. There's maybe half a dozen songwriters in Nashville who are actually making a decent living, to be able to buy a house, get married, have children, do all the traditional stuff. It's not available currently because of Spotify, because they're just not paying. So there's the economic side of it, which I have no kind of answer to other than hopefully songwriters making a lot of noise. Although I'm not so sure that songwriters are motivated to create great, immortal, anthemic songs these days because of the lack of economic motivation. It's not like you write for money, but if there's no money to be made, it's hard to get motivated to write.
Yeah.
Other than that, if you throw that to the wind and say, I'm going to do it anyway, regardless, which is what I've done, to great economic upheaval. I mean, it's a roller coaster ride. I've made a lot of money, I've made no money, and it just goes up and down like that. To be true to your muse gets back to that idea of yoga. It is to be open to whatever the cosmos brings to you in that moment. Understanding that a popular song has a verse and a chorus. It's usually 3.5 minutes long. I look at that like a painting. So a painting, be it Van Gogh or Cézanne or any Da Vinci, you name them, whoever they are, they're still restricted to a rectangle,
Right.
pretty much.
There's
The
parameters.
rectangle, that's the parameter, and you have a palette of colors based on 3 primary colors, and you fill that rectangle with those. So a song is a similar thing. It's 3.5 minute song. It has a verse and a chorus. What are you going to do with that to make it iconic, to make it immortal? That's the struggle. And to understand that and to be interested in that, to follow that path, to create your unique individual statement within those 3 minutes is the challenge. And it's a wonderful process if you can, particularly if you get a response, as I fortunately have gotten, for how I've filled those 3 minutes.
Do you do any teaching for the younger generation?
I've done a lot of teaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's important because I think some of the message that you carry is obviously trying to help people understand where they need to be guided towards.
Well, that's also, teaching has helped me express myself as I'm doing here, because
Yes,
I've had to analyze what is it exactly that I do, and to understand that and to be able to express it.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. What else do you have coming up? Anything that we can tell the audience about?
There's a wonderful Australian singer, songwriter, artist who has had tremendous success in Australia, who's moved to Nashville some years ago, and he's trying to make his way. And his name is Rick Price. He's had tremendous success over the years in Australia and throughout Southeast Asia. He's on a tour right now. And we've been writing, and there's a new single coming out that we wrote together called Let It Go, which is pretty appropriate for... so that's coming out. And with digital streaming and all that, it'll be available everywhere.
Okay.
Mark Jordan, who I've had the writing relationship for about 40 years, has been delving into our older catalogue, and he's coming out with a song that we wrote together shortly.
Oh, wonderful.
So there's those two coming out. I'm always sending songs to Bonnie Raitt because I love what she does.
Yeah.
And so hopefully she'll do, as old as she is, she's still a tremendous artist, and she might respond to another one of the songs that I send.
And where can people find you? You have a website?
I'm all over the internet.
Okay.
I have a website, Facebook, and all that stuff.
John Capek.
Yeah, Capek, and the website has a lot of my covers, songs on there. You can just hit it and play some of them. I
learned today that your last name in Czech means the stork.
That's one interpretation. So Chap, C-A-P, is a stork. A Capek is a little stork.
Well, I just found it interesting that they deliver the babies and you deliver the hits. Well, listen, John, it's been great getting to meet you. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast, and I really appreciate your time today.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate you. All right. Bye, y'all.